I found my way to Cheakaity Brown's music via these very charming social media videos where he would cook dinner while cooking up a beat. Toss some potatoes, fry some chicken, right next to a MIDI synthesizer and a laptop on the kitchen counter. At the end of the short window into his day, he'd have a delicious looking meal and a funky sound to go along with it. Bop your head too. This was it, I thought. Food and music, yes, the match made in heaven. Culture as it's lived. And in bite-size, still sizzling pieces, Cheakaity was letting us experience links I had always known were deeply important. Cheakaity Brown is a tall young brother with swag. You'll often find him decked out in sunglasses and an early hip-hop style Kangol hat, often, of course, with headphones. There are layers of gold necklaces which shine from his chest, and they're adorned with the occasional ruby or pearl. He looks confident and so natural on a mic, in a studio, on a keyboard, like he was born for it. I won't wanna chase you. But the truth is, you never know what calls someone to stand in front of a microphone. You never know what provokes them to the stark vulnerability of singing their heart out in front of a room full of people. For Cheakaity, it began with a fight for his life. My name is Meklit, and this is Movement, Music and Migration Remixed. Can you tell us the story of your name?
The story of my name. So, Chie in the Liberian Kru dialect represents ownership. Kete means to split. So, Cheakaity together means the one that can break unbreakable things in two. Heavy name. I don't know why I don't know what that was all about. That's what it means.
And do you think that he wanted you to break unbreakable things?
Our immigrant parents, they always want to bestow some type of prophecy onto their children. Or you're going to be like our Moses, because they want, the best for their children. And I've done things where it felt like odds were stacked completely against me, and I've overcome it.
Like what?
So, for example, I'm a person that cheated death.
Cheakaity grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland, right outside D.C., the largest majority Black county in America. And he represents the complex strains of Black culture in this country. His mom was from the American South. His dad was a Liberian immigrant. On Cheakaity's records, you can hear him channeling the Baptist church, the R&B greats, and the local giants of go-go music. But you can also hear the West African church where his father preached every Sunday, where the pews were lined with shakers and tambourines. Cheakaity was drawn to music as far back as he can remember. At 7 years old, he was already playing drums for his dad's church and learning to cook fried chicken skin and apple pie from his grandma, his Southern grandma. He was full of energy and life, but one day, when Cheakaity was 9, he didn't feel right. At first, his parents thought he was just trying to play hooky.
Then the next day, I get up, collapsed in the hallway. I can't move. I'm like freaking out. Parents come upstairs. They're like, okay, that's definitely strange.
So they went to the doctor. The doctor ran some tests. The family left, but then the doctor called them.
I found something, and you need to rush him to the ER like right now. You're racing against the clock at this point.
The doctor had found a rare autoimmune disorder
called Guillain-Barré syndrome. So pretty much what was happening, I had like a common cold, and your white blood cells supposed to fight off the common cold.
Yes.
But they continued to fight, and they were actually eating my nerve endings, causing me to be a paraplegic. Like if you took a spoon and just like scraped it against my hand, I couldn't feel it. I was on track to die. I was on track to be a vegetable.
Wow. And you were 9 years old?
9 years old, 1999.
The paralysis was inching up his body, from his feet and hands to his chest and neck and head. But Cheikaity, remember, came from a church family on both sides. They were not about to just sit back and see what the doctors would do.
You got the southern side that's coming through, and it's real tactile. So put the hands on your forehead. Oh, Lord, bless him, oh, save him. They're shaking. You sitting there, I'm sitting there paralyzed, just in bed. And then you get the same thing on my dad's side. It's just louder, and you just don't know what they're saying. And it's just all kinds of screams and chants and stomping and just like clapping and just chaos.
Love chaos.
But true to the Cheikaity name, the person that like, if anybody's going to get through this, it's going to be the one that can get through something that's unbeatable.
And what was the turning point?
The turning point was it stopped in my eyes and it just went back down.
So what was it like to learn to play music again after that?
So it was frustrating coming back because the doctor's orders were, okay, you can go back and do these things, but slowly and don't overexert yourself.
Okay.
That was the one rule. So from there, I started to lean more into the singing. We had like a choir leader that wanted to give me like a solo. So, oh yeah, you had like a miracle. So we're gonna give you the solo, and that's gonna be like your testimony song. So he taught me this song. And from there I learned, oh, I can sing like a soloist. I didn't know that. I don't know at what point I would have discovered it had it not been for the ordeal I've already been through.
Right.
You're right here in front of me. And that's right where you're supposed to be.
According to Cheikaity, there are gifts that you are born ready to reveal in the world. The ones that are obvious, that you get recognized for from the beginning. And then there are the gifts you have to search for. The ones that get uncovered by life's bruises, that must be honed with time and perseverance.
So I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
For Cheikaity, singing was exactly that. It was a buried treasure. And once he found it, he was never going to let it go. The late, great scholar, musician, and revolutionary activist, Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan, said, "When we sing, we announce our existence." For Cheikaity, singing was that megaphone, a way to reflect the wholeness of who he was. So, Washington, D.C. is like, it's such an iconic Black city, even the way the city was founded and formed. And as, you know, well, first, I guess, did you think of yourself as Liberian American? And how did like global Blackness feel to you growing up? Like, how did you identify?
I didn't think I started identifying until I was an adult because...
As Liberian American?
As Liberian and African American. It was just always something I had to explain. It just always felt like something I had to be on the defense about because it wasn't necessarily cool to be African around like Black people and, you know, all the other cultures that you might meet are the minority actually growing up. That's one thing that was a big culture shock when I started growing up and traveling outside of like DC and the rest of the country, especially the rest of the world. And I was like, oh, I didn't really realize how Black this area was. And I just thought that everywhere just had a lot of Black people. Yeah, I didn't really sing. I always knew I was different growing up. I just knew I wasn't like everybody else, but I would try to be. But of course, being the kid with the funny name, oh, you're the African one. Oh, our African cousins are here, so they're making all the jokes and they're doing all the jokes you could think of. It wasn't until like I'm an adult where I had like some sense of pride in it. Yes, I am a black man. Yes, I am an African American man, but I'm also a West African first generation. I also know exactly where I can trace my lineage back, at least on this side.
Yes.
I know what my name means. I know it has meaning. I know it has purpose. And that gives me some sense of direction. And I know I have like a lot of friends that can't say the same.
Yeah, I identify with a lot of that. You know, growing up, I grew up in Brooklyn, and I definitely got called African booty scratcher more times than I could count. You know, like I feel like there's a whole podcast to be done just on that term. You know?
Oh, that would be a great. Listen, the name alone, the African Booty Scratcher podcast, that would do Pulitzer Prize, probably winning.
You might not,
because everybody automatically knows where you're going with it. Everybody automatically knows the feeling attached to that term. It's like having to explain yourself, having to explain your school lunch. So the first reaction is to make fun of it,
right?
Which we learn later is like a term of endearment. Like, you know, it's still all love, but that's what we do. They poke fun at each other,
right.
So
right,
yeah.
Was there a moment where that kind of claiming of pride and identity kind of really took root?
Being young, I think there was a turning point where like I became like to my adulthood when I started saying my name, and then like women say, "Oh, that's so beautiful! Oh my God, I love that name." I was like, "Oh yeah, cool." Well, but growing up, it's like, you know, you get, "Oh, what's your name? What?" And you get laughed at. But when I stopped getting laughed at, and they start looking at it as beauty, I was like, "Yeah, by the way, you know, this is my name." And then, of course, when Black Panther came out, and this whole nother movement of wanting to be proud to be African again, I was like, oh, it's cool now. Great. So things go in cycles, kind of like fashion. So it was like the Afrocentric movement that it's in vogue for a while, then we move on to something else, and it comes back and we move on to something else. And a funny thing is, like, one of the characters in the movie, the antagonist, his name was Killmonger.
It's about 2 billion people all over the world that looks like us, but their lives are a lot harder. Wakanda has the tools to liberate them all.
And what tools?
His dad was directly from the place Wakanda, the mythical African nation, and his mother was African American. I was like, would you look at that? Wow. So I understood, I automatically identified with what he was saying. He understands the Black African American struggle because he experienced it firsthand, but he also knows it has a rich history of his lineage, and he understands kingship and kingdom and all this other stuff. And he understands inheritance. He understands all these like royal concepts, but he exists in his reality as a Black man, a Black American man, which I thought was so profound. I was like, wow, that's exactly what being Cheakaity every day is like. It's like experiencing that. And then seeing people just like have their think pieces about the movie, and seeing people show up to the theaters and like all the traditional garb they can, and just going all out for some place that doesn't really exist. And then now they got them thinking, okay, cool. Now I want to see where I'm from. Now I want to know, who am I? This sense of identity. And now it's widely accepted, when a couple years ago it's still African booty scratcher. It's still, they're making the jokes. It's like we're accepted, but not quite accepted. But definitely the last 10 years, that was a moment I can definitely look up and say, okay, now it's acceptable.
Growing up, Cheikaity never visited Liberia with his father. About 10 years ago, he started thinking about closing the circuit of his lineage and going back to the coast where all of his ancestors departed the African continent, hundreds of years apart from each other. And he wasn't the only one. In recent years, the whole coast of West Africa has been experiencing a surge of interest. An organization in Ghana was even sponsoring African Americans to travel to Africa. They were calling it the Year of Return.
And it represented how many years? 400 years since I think the slave ships left that coast and came to America. And this is supposed to represent like a great year of returning back home. And so they had like all kinds of festivals. They had something called Afrochella there. It's like Coachella, but it's like a big Afrobeats festival. And Ghana was opening up like the ports and everything. And it was like, hey, come, we want all the African Americans to come and see your home and see what it's like to be over here in the motherland.
Did you ever go back?
See, that's another long part of the story. The one thing that stopped me from going over there, get this. So I had to take the malaria shot and the yellow fever shot.
Oh, I know. Yep.
So I go to get my shots. I take the malaria shot, no problem. About to take the yellow fever shot. They said, there's one question we have to ask you. Probably doesn't apply to you, but it's a very rare case that if you so happen to have Guillain-Barré syndrome, you're going to, there's a 50-50 chance you can get it again if you take this shot. And I was like,
if you take yellow fever?
If I take yellow fever, I'll say, as a matter of fact, I have had Guillain-Barré syndrome. And I was like, what are the odds of the one rare random thing that I just so happened to have when I was 9 is the one thing stopped me from going over there?
But it really requires you to like face something in yourself to like get the courage to like move forward.
Yeah, it's one of those. My dad he's 100% against it. He's like, no, I'm not going that again. I almost lost you once. I'm not gonna like risk that again. Me, it's like I'm faced with something. It's like, all right, am I the one that can really break unbreakable things, or is lightning gonna strike twice? I said gamble. It's with my life. So scary stuff. But
that is scary.
I think more so of my fear of death is my fear of living unfulfilled.
Let me take my time.
If you're gonna do something, do it in a way that will echo throughout time. That after you're gone, it's like, okay, you made this impact here and you did what was inside of you to do. And when your grandson, 5 grandsons down, oh yeah, Cheikaity. You had a great grandfather, Cheikaity, and he was a musician and he was a chef. And he comes from his father's side that came here from Liberia. And his great-grandfather was a warrior. And that guy did magic. And his mom is from the South and everything. And he comes from people that can cook and everything. And so now you can go and do these things because you're empowered to do it through Cheikaity, who was here in 2023, you know what I mean? So that echo and eternity thing is really big for me. So like I think I'm more than afraid of dying. I'm afraid of dying not having done all that I'm supposed to do or all that I could do.
It's a shame you gotta hold me. I get so weak. Things that you do to me. I was blind, but now I can see. And I can't deny you gotta
Cheikaity's latest album is called Grown Man, and you can find it wherever you listen to music. And for those of you in the DC area, you can find him in any number of clubs around town, testifying from the stage. I can say from experience, he puts on a damn good show. And in case you're wondering, Cheikaity has still not been back to Liberia. But after getting vaccinated for COVID with no side effects, he's feeling more sure than ever that he will.
Sometimes we find all we have late at night. Things I know.
Movement is produced by Ian Koss and myself, Meklit Hadero. Our editor is Megan Tan. Our co-creator and podcast godmother is Julie Kane. Our broadcast partner is The World. We are supported by the Mellon Foundation and distributed by PRX. If you enjoyed this story, consider sending it to a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Believe me, this stuff really does help folks to find the show. And if you happen to be curious about my records or performances, you can learn more at meklitmusic.com. Movement will be back with new episodes every other Tuesday through the fall.
From PRX.